On this week's episode, we discuss 6 life quotes from Arthur Ashe. Let me give you 2 examples of why I think quotes are so magical. Take marriage. A couple could have been married for 50 years and they could be at a wedding reception and they could ask, could all of the married couples stand up and start eliminating the couples by how long they've been married and end up with a couple that's been married 50 years. And they ask that couple, what was your secret to stay married so long? Many times what comes from that couple will be great, terrific advice summed up in 1 or 2 sentences. That could be a quote that you could use in your marriage, in your relationship. Another example, someone could be in business for 30 years and very successful at business. And they could give a quote that sums up that success of 30 years in business that you can use in your business, that you could use in your life. That's why I think quotes are so magical. They can sum up years of someone's life that could help us in our walk in this life. Welcome to episode 19. I started this quest for quotes about 3 or 4 years ago. Searching for these quotes was a part of what I called my self-improvement project. I'm always talking about Evernote on this podcast, and I have a folder in my note in my I have a folder, in my Evernote called self-improvement project. And part of that project, I use things like meditation, reading, and that is a big one, reading. And I mostly do audiobooks. One of my big regrets is the fact that I did not develop a love of learning and reading at an early age. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later in the podcast. And exercise, a part of my self-improvement project. Getting out of comfort zones. That's one big thing I've been doing over the last several years is getting out of my comfort zone. One of the ways I do that is if I'm in the close proximity of a stranger, I'll strike up a conversation with them. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, I never would have done that. So getting out of comfort zones is a part of my self-improvement project. This is the second episode with the new format that I started on last week's episode. The new format merges my love of lists and my love of quotes. This week, we look at 6 of my favorite quotes for the late, great tennis player Arthur Ashe. Arthur Ashe, and the Ashe is spelled A-S-H-E, wasn't just a great tennis player, he was a great human being. According to biography.com, Ashe was born in 1943 in Richmond, Virginia, and passed away in 1993. Arthur Ashe became the first and still the only African-American male tennis player to win the U.S. Open and Wimbledon. He is also the first African-American man to be ranked as the #1 tennis player in the world. The next fact, in my opinion, gives you the true measure of the type of human being that Arthur Ashe was. Always an activist, when Ashe learned that he had contracted AIDS via a blood transfusion, he turned his efforts into raising awareness about the disease before finally succumbing to the disease on February 6, 1993. A lot of people, after getting a death sentence like that, are not necessarily going to consider others. And at that time, when he contracted AIDS, you didn't have the medications that you have now that can keep you alive. For instance, Magic Johnson, the great former NBA player who is now running the Los Angeles Lakers, and he was such a great player for them for so many years. He contracted AIDS, and he is still thriving because of all of the great medications that there are today. One of the things that I love about doing this podcast is that I get to learn things about people that I never knew, people that I've been knowing about for a very long time, because I grew up watching Arthur Ashe played tennis and rooting for him against players like Jimmy Connors. And I never knew that Arthur Ashe was a junior. His full name was Arthur Robert Ashe Jr. Another fact about Arthur Ashe that make his accomplishments in my eyes even greater is the fact that his mother passed away when he was just 6 years old. I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like for him to lose his mother at such an early age. Now, his father, because their mother died at such an early age, consciously decided to be very strict on Arthur and his brother so that the effect of not having their mother wouldn't cause them to fall into a lot of trouble. And I can see how that could definitely happen in that situation. The last thing about Ash's life that I want to mention, you notice a lot in the lives of successful people. He started playing tennis at age 7. It's not always the case, but it is often the case that those who know what they want to do at an early age in life are very successful. One of the most successful people that I know personally was like that. I watched my brother after he graduated from high school and how he methodically laid out his plans for the future, which included putting himself through college. And that happens so much. You look at Warren Buffett, started investing at a very early age. You look at Bill Gates, started getting involved with computing at a very, very early age. Okay, let's look at the 6 life quotes from Arthur Ashe. Number 1, you are never really playing an opponent. You are playing yourself, your own highest standards. And when you reach your limits, that is real joy. When you know you've done your best, when you know you've given it your all, you feel much better about an activity that you've participated in. But if you know you haven't done your best, you know you didn't really put a lot into it, you don't find any pride or joy in that. I love that quote. Number 2, and this is about how a person dresses. Clothes and manners do not make the man, but when he is made, they greatly improve his appearance. I am one of those who is in the camp of dress for success. I've seen this over and over and over again. People treat you differently when you dress well. I don't care where you're at, if it's church, if it's school, if it's work, if it's just at the mall, if it's in the streets, at an event. People treat you better when you dress well. There's no question about that in my mind. Whether or not we like that or not, we may not. It's a fact. People treat you better when you dress well. Another little tip for you, kind of related to this. If you want to be treated like a rock star, take a place that you frequent, could be a restaurant, sushi bar, one of those places in the mall where you can go and get a massage in a chair like I do a lot because I have fibromyalgia, which is muscle pain. I've been diagnosed with that since 1993, 4-ish, 1994, somewhere in there. Pick one of those places that you frequent. Hopefully the same person usually helps you, or the same few people usually help you. And in a budget that you can afford, give them a good tip. I'm not saying how much, but in terms of what they normally would get, give them a better tip than that. And if you frequent that place, you'll be treated like a rock star. Me and my wife went on vacation to the big island of Hawaii recently. I've told you about that. And we always take a tour of wherever we go, and we usually use Gray Line tours. So toward the end of the tour that we were taking of the big island of Hawaii and looking at the volcanoes and various different spots and locations, when we got to the last spot, I pulled the driver over to the side and I gave him his tip then instead of waiting at the end of the trip when they let you off at your spot wherever they picked you up at. I tipped him at the last location that we stopped at. And instantly he started treating me with a lot of respect, trying to get to know me, where I'm from and what I do and all of these type things. And when we were coming up to the spot where they picked me and my wife up right in front of our room that we were staying at, right in front of the hotel where we were staying, just before he got to the spot, he was threw so many sirs on me, you would think I was the president. You want to be treated like a rock star, use that tip. Number 3 quote from Arthur Ashe. Success is a journey, not a destination. The doing is often more important than the outcome. If you can make this a part of your life and learning to enjoy the journey, things will be so much better. Give you an example. You want this shiny new car you've always wanted. You get that new car. In a few months, the newness is going to wear off. It's just like kids at Christmas when they get their gifts and they play with their gifts and they're all excited about their gifts. In a few months, that excitement wears off. But if you can learn to love the journey in life, you'll be so much better off. Number 4, Arthur Ashe quote that I like. One important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparation. If you're someone who does public speaking every now and then and you get really nervous about speaking in front of a group, the best way to deal with that nervousness is to be fully prepared. Really know what it is that you're talking about. That will go a long way in dealing with that nervousness. People, I think, respect you a lot when you have self-confidence in life. I'm not talking about cockiness, but self-confidence really attracts people to someone. But to have that self-confidence, you need to be prepared. Number 5 from Arthur Ashe. If I were to say, God, why me, about bad things, then I should have said, God, why me, about the good things that happened in my life. That's a deep one, folks. Meditate on that one. Get that one into your psyche. Because one of the biggest hangups that a lot of people have about believing in God is the suffering that happens in the world. Now, that whole topic is too big for this podcast, so we're not going to really get into that. But I think this is a good quote that if you can wrap your mind around this, it can help with that whole idea of suffering in the world. If I were to say, God, why me, about bad things, then I should have said, God, why me, about the good things that happened in my life. And saying, God, why me, about the good things that happen in your life, help you to have gratitude in life. And that subject keeps coming up on this podcast because I think one of the ways to revolutionize your life, especially in this idea of being happy in life, is to learn to have an attitude of gratitude. Number 6 quote from Arthur Ashe. You've got to get to the stage in life where going for it is more important than winning or losing. Really, when I think about this podcast that I'm doing and the stage that I'm at in my life right now, it's kind of a stage of where I decided to say, hey, I'm going to go for it in terms of doing my own thing, in terms of doing business and making money in business. I'm going to go for it. And that's where I'm at in my life. Does it mean it's going to work out perfectly? No. But I can look back and say, you know what? I went for it. I love this quote. You've got to get to the stage in life where going for it is more important than winning or losing. That's going to do it for this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed this focus on Arthur Ashe. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the show.